Okay.
Tell me when we're ready.
All right. Get ready in 30 seconds. $15, $14, $13, $12, $11, $10, $9, $8, $7, $6, $5, $4, $3, $2.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to the Plymouth United Church of Christ, located in the heart of Detroit, and as I like to say, the very tip top of the medical center area in Detroit. And today, this first Sunday after Christmas, I want to raise a point. I know a lot of people are disappointed with Christmas this year. Disappointed because you couldn't have your family, your friends over. Disappointed because there was no club to go to toast in Christmas Eve. But I tell you something, you think you had a tough Christmas. Imagine Mary and Joseph. Mary and Joseph, their Christmas, they're in a manger. Mary's having a baby. There are cows and other animals in the manger. You have eventually shepherds coming who have been watching their flocks in the fields by night. They've come because an angel of the Lord tells them that the Christ child has been born. You have wise men who come a little later, and Mary and Joseph are trying to figure all that out. And just like we're here the Sunday after Christmas, at some point after the birth of Jesus, and we don't know if it was immediately, we don't know if it was 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we don't know if maybe it was 2 years. But at some point after wise men leave, Mary and Joseph get word that King Herod, wants to kill the baby Jesus. And because he wants to kill the baby Jesus, he's killing all the children under the age of 2 in Bethlehem. And so Mary and Joseph leave. And when they leave Bethlehem, the birthplace of the baby Jesus, they head out to Egypt. They don't go to Assyria, which is modern-day Iraq. They don't go to Iran, which is, in their time, was called Persia. They don't go to Greece. They don't go to Rome. They don't go to Corinth. They don't go to any of these places. They go to Egypt. And I think that there's a reason why they go to Egypt. They go to Egypt because Egypt had a shared history with Israel. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. They went to Egypt because they could blend in. Everybody there was dark. And they could, not like the modern Egyptians, but the Nubians, they were dark. And Mary and Joseph were probably dark-skinned. And the little baby Jesus was probably dark-skinned. And they knew that going into Bethlehem, from Bethlehem to Egypt, they could blend in. Now, why Egypt? Number one, Egypt was 420 miles from Bethlehem. Think about that. 429 miles. Not only is it 429 miles, the first part of that trip in northern Sinai is the desert. Mike Daniels, you went there with me in 2009. That is an awesome desert. That desert overwhelmed me in an air-conditioned bus. And all I could think of was, I said, man, what would it have been like if you were on a donkey? And your wife had just had a baby, and the baby is a little baby. And you don't know where you're going, but somehow they knew where they were going. Nazareth, when they come back from Egypt, is another 70 miles from Bethlehem. Mary and Joseph took the baby Jesus to the first northern place in the Sinai, a place called Pharma. From Pharma, they kept moving because they were afraid that Herod was going to get them. They kept moving to a place called Tel Basta. And then from there to Mosterad, from there to Belbis, to Samud, to Sakha, and to the valley of Natrum. And if that were not enough, they kept on moving. When I'm mentioning these cities, they're going up and down the Nile River, from the east to the west to the east. And finally, they move on to where modern Cairo is now, to Old Cairo. And they went to a place called Mataria, and then to Al-Madiyah, to Minya, to Kusan. And the point that I'm making, and it never dawned on me till I went to Egypt. We took a church trip in 2009 to Egypt. And one of the lessons that I learned there was that it wasn't like Mary and Joseph just left Bethlehem and checked into the Holiday Inn in Cairo. They were on the move because they got word that Herod's men were on the move. And my guess is that they chose Egypt for 3 or 4 reasons. Number one, and the main reason, God told them to go to Egypt. Number 2, Egypt seemed like it was far enough away to discourage Herod from chasing them. Number 3, they could blend in because they looked like the Nubians. And number 4, the historical connection between Egypt and Israel. Mary and Joseph were like you, and they were like me. When you're under pressure, you go with your best thought. They didn't have time to think about this. They didn't go into Bethlehem with Mary pregnant thinking about, we're going to leave and go to Egypt. But they are young people. And there's something about being young. In our youth, there's creativity. And in our youth, there's a fearlessness. And Mary and Joseph were fearless. Mary and Joseph were creative. And so Mary and Joseph did what young couples do. I think of the young couples that I know in this church. And young couples all around the world. Young people figure it out. Young people figured it out. I married a young couple. I guess I can say their name. Samantha and Demetrius. They are Wendy Baxter's daughter and son-in-law. I married them about a year ago in New York, maybe 2 years now, because they have 2 children. May have been 3, I don't know. But we got to get it right. They've got children that are, they're 2 children. I think they've been married in these 3 years. But when I married them, the thing that struck me was Demetrius is a high-powered entertainment lawyer in New York. He represents some of the biggest of the hip-hop artists and some others. Samantha is also a lawyer, and she represents the president of Rwanda. You think about that. And so I was just talking to them about marriage and, with their high-powered lives, what will life be like when you're married? And I said, and by the way, what will it be like when you have children? And we all, the 3 of us looked at it, and I think my wife was there too, but they're looking at it, and they said, her husband said it first. He said, we'll just have to figure it out. And I fell out laughing, and I said, and I'm sure they will figure it out. I said, these are 2 smart people. They've got all the training in the world. If they can figure out marriage, where he's representing the hip-hop community and she's representing the president of Rwanda, I'm saying they can figure out a baby. They can figure out a baby. And young people do this so well. I think of all the young people right now who are looking at this program and those who are not, who are raising children in a pandemic. You're doing something none of us have ever done before. You are raising your children with distance learning. That's a wonderful thing. And I'm so impressed with you. And every time I talk to a young mother, a young father, I come away with the impression that I said, the world will be all right. Because the people who are most fertile, the people who are in the childbearing and child-rearing years, they are young and they will figure it out. And what do? They do the best that they can do. Like Mary and Joseph, sometimes you and I feel threatened. They were threatened by Herod, and so they're on the run. But there are times in our lives when you and I might feel threatened. Threatened because of this pandemic. Am I going to catch it? Will my parents or grandparents come down with the virus? Threatened with the fear of death. Death is all around us. I talked with a young man yesterday. He came to shovel my snow. And he shovels my snow because my wife has told him that her husband's crazy. And that at 69, he still wants to shovel the snow. And she says to this young man, Dwayne, if you don't hurry up and get over here, my husband's going to go out and shovel the snow. And I'm afraid he's going to kill himself. And I'm on the other hand, I'm saying, it snows. I can't wait to put my hands on the shovel and the shovel in the snow. But the young fellow, Dwayne, came over yesterday, and when he finished shoveling the snow, he said, Reverend Hood, I don't know what I'm going to do with this pandemic. I said, what do you mean? He said, man, I had an auntie to die. I had another person to die. He said, I've had about 10 people die this year. And I was commiserating with him. I said, man, I buried at least 8 folk from the front steps of the church. I said, this is an unusual time. And if you dwell on this time too much, what you will find is that you can be overwhelmed with the threat of death. There are those who are threatened with taking the vaccine for the virus. And I'm going to be the first to say, when it's my time, I'm going to take the vaccine. And I know the history of vaccines, particularly in the African American community. But this is an opportunity to move on to the next level and to get beyond the fear of death. There are those who are fearful because they're uncertain of the future. Will I have a job? Will I be able to pay my mortgage? Will I be able to pay my gas bill, my electric bill, my water bill? Will I be able to pay for food? And there are those who are afraid of financial ruin. And just when people are most fearful of financial ruin, we have a president who didn't sign the bill last night that would put how many people, a million people, with financial uncertainty. You have fear of an erosion of love and tenderness. There's some people who are wondering, will I be able to survive the pandemic? Because I never had to live with my wife. I never had to live with my husband more than at night. And most of those hours are in the bed. If you are stripped of the bed, if you're stripped of dinner, if you're stripped of a couple of hours of binge watching Netflix, Disney Plus, Amazon Prime, then you have to talk to that person. You have to talk to your wife. You have to talk to your husband. And you may learn things about your wife and your husband you didn't know. Now, Walter, I know you got a big house. And you can, Maxine's got is her workshop in the basement? Yeah. And then you probably go in the other direction. Yeah, and I understand that. My wife has commandeered the whole first floor of the house. And she puts on a legal robe. And I don't want to get in the way of the legal robe. And so I go upstairs. If she comes upstairs, I go to the 3rd floor. Now that's a blessing. Not everybody has a 3rd floor. But I'm going to tell you something. The pandemic is teaching us things about each other we never hoped to know. One of the biggest lessons from Mary and Joseph, the Holy Family, and the baby Jesus in Egypt is that they traveled 429 miles. And in them traveling 429 miles just to get to Egypt, and then when they get to Egypt, people start worshiping the baby Jesus. And this is part of the story I didn't realize, but they go to at least 10 cities, 10 towns in Egypt. And virtually everywhere they go, the baby Jesus, this is according to historical, anecdotal record, the baby Jesus, if he touched the ground opened up to living springs of fresh water. And everywhere he's going, he's touching the ground. And part of the reason why they had to keep moving in Egypt was because when Pharaoh found out that there was a baby Jesus and the Egyptians, they had heard about the coming of the baby Jesus, but when Pharaoh heard that people were worshiping the baby Jesus, and not only were they worshiping the baby Jesus, but idols, handmade gods were falling down. They were bowing down to the baby Jesus. That Pharaoh said, I can't stand this. He's messing up my routine. And so Mary and Joseph, on the one hand, they have King Herod and his men. On the other hand, they have Pharaoh, who's now looking at them, and people in Egypt are starting to worship the baby Jesus. And so, to me, what this represents is that in the parlance of baseball, you have the fastball down the middle of home plate. That's typically the easiest ball for a batter to hit. The batter lines up at the plate, and the ball just comes straight at it. And all the batter, him or her, all the batter has to do is time it. And they step into it, and they hit that ball, and it takes off. But a crafty pitcher will throw a couple fastballs, but then the pitcher winds up, throws the ball, and the ball starts wiggling. That's a curve ball. And the ball starts wiggling at a point where the batter doesn't see it coming. The batter thinks it's a fastball down the middle of the plate, and just as the batter steps into it, the ball curves out or curves in. And then they have another pitch. It's a slider. The ball comes, it looks like it's coming right at you, and then the ball drops. And then they have another pitch, the slow pitch, where the pitcher lines up like, he winds up like he's going to throw a fastball, but then he slows it down, and the batter can't figure it out. And so the poor batter has to figure all this out before they can make contact with the ball. And so the real question in life is, our life is like a batter at the plate. And the challenge at being the batter at the plate is that sometimes life will throw you a curveball. And if life throws you a curveball, you've got to figure it out. And sometimes the curves that we face are the curveballs of our own making. What's a curveball of your own making? A bad choice in relationships. A poor choice in personal behavior. What do I mean by that? I'm at an age right now where a lot of my contemporaries are falling apart because of poor choices in personal behavior, poor choices in what they drink and drink, poor choices in what they smoke, poor choices in what they eat or don't eat. And what we find is that the accumulation of a lifetime of poor choices can mess your body up. There's the poor choice of laziness over productivity. And you come into your maturity and you realize that had I been more productive when I was younger, then maybe I would live a better life in my maturity. There are other curveballs. The curveballs of the unforeseen. It's one thing to have a curveball of your own doing. I just didn't prepare myself. But it's another thing to have a curveball of the unforeseen. the curveball of death, the curveball of sustained illness, the curveball of a loss of a job that you did not see coming. I think about the poor people of Bethlehem. When we were there in 2018, the people of Bethlehem were glad to see us, even though they were Islamic and predominantly Arab. They were glad to see us because I can tell you something, money knows no religion. And I got the feeling in 2018 that the people of Bethlehem, the people of Jericho, who are Arab, that they could care less if we are Christian. Matter of fact, they're glad we're Christian. Because in knowing that we were Christian, they knew that we wanted to come and be with them. And the economy was transcending whatever hard feelings people had about religion. And so there are other curveballs of the unforeseen. The people of Bethlehem really don't have a Christmas this year, and that's the city of Christmas. They have no Christmas not because Christians can't come or won't come or don't want to come, but we can't come because of the pandemic. The more I read about Mary and Joseph, the more I want to go back to Bethlehem. The more I want to go back to farming in Egypt, and the more I want to travel up and down the Nile River and to try to figure out what in the world were Mary and Joseph thinking about. But I can't go there right now because of the unforeseen. There's the unforeseen of home invasion, the unforeseen of emotional devastation of family and friends at a time like a pandemic. There's the curveball of health care and health challenges. And there's disappointment of a dream, flunking out of the inability to finance a business, the disruption in love. And what do I mean by the disruption in love? I'm 69. As I think back over my life, I think about how wonderful it is. I found my wife at 21 years of age. Now, we didn't get married until 24. But what I don't think parents tell children, my parents never told me this, I didn't realize at 17 that the most fertile time in our lives is right then. I didn't realize that the time to have a baby, hopefully you're out of school, but the time to have a baby is when the father and the mother are fertile, when you can have a child. And that tends to be in our late teens and early 20s. And nobody told me, my mother and father never once told me to get married. They never told me that. They told me get an education. But they never told me you ought to get married and get married young. And then when we got married young, my wife's GYNOB, Cecil Jonas, began to talk to her about having a baby. And how, we had our first son when she was 30. And nobody ever told me that, anytime, around your early 30s, moving on up, every year, the older you get, potentially the more difficult it is to have a child. But nobody talked to me like that. And I don't know, many of my friends that I grew up with, particularly the girls, their mothers and fathers were telling them, don't get married right away, don't rush this thing. My own mother got married at 19 because she was in love with my father, who was 27. But I think had my mother had an opportunity to do it over again, she would not have had me at 21. She's still trying to finish school, but what I'm saying is that there's disruption in the dating process. There's disruption. The person who thinks they're going to be a player. The person who thinks that they're just going to play the field forever does not realize that by the time you're ready to settle down, you may have missed your opportunity. You may have missed Mr. Right. You may have missed Miss Right. And I can't tell you how many people that I talk to over the course of the year who look back over their lives and I think really are in wonderment, did I make the right decision? Because there was a disruption in the mate selection process. This is all part of growing up. I do not think many of us saw this pandemic coming. The free concert that our church produced last Tuesday, if you haven't seen it, go to the website, church website. It's also on Facebook. But we've had over 1,100 people look at that free concert. And, you know, some people ask me, say, why did the church do this? And it was really our church's way of appreciating the musicians who are right now living in the face of a curveball. If a musician is making their money going from club to club, going from party to party, venue to venue, but funeral to funeral, Sheila. You know, one funeral singer told me, she said, before the pandemic, I was making $2,000 a week, primarily on funerals. You think about that. That's a lot of money for a person to make. And then on top of that, not just the funerals, but the clubs, the bars, the private parties, the weddings, church services. And this musician was telling me I was making $2,000 a week. But all of that has been stripped away because of a curveball you never saw coming. And so what the church was doing with this little concert that you can see right on the church webpage, that was our way of saying to the musicians, we love you, we respect you, we honor you, and we recognize that life has thrown you a curveball. And because life has thrown you a curveball, we're going to do our part to straighten the curve out. But being surprised by a curveball or the unforeseen is one thing. And that's understandable. If you have planned your life in one direction and the bottom falls out, that's a curveball. That's one thing. But the real issue is not whether or not there's a curveball in your life, but how do you respond to it? Josh Gibson, the great Negro League baseball player, one of the greatest batters of all time. Some people think he's better than Babe Ruth. But Josh Gibson, believe me, had to face the curveball. And what is he doing facing the curveball? He's just waiting patiently to see which way that ball is breaking. And he's never blinking, not taking his eye off the ball. And when the ball breaks the way he thinks it's going, he steps into it and knocks the ball out of the park. And so the real question is not whether or not there's a curveball thrown in your life, not whether or not the bottom has fallen out, but the real issue is, do I fall apart when the bottom falls out from under me? And if I don't fall apart, then I'm going to be all right. But if I am devastated because of death, devastated because of divorce, devastated because of the loss of a job, so much so that I am just numb and I can't think straight, then that curveball has gotten the best of you. So the real question is, how do we respond? It seems like not a day goes by. I've never seen any president like the president we've had. I've never read about a president like the president we've had. But it seems like not a day has gone by from day one where the president has not thrown life a curveball. For Americans, and frankly, not just the people in America, but the world. Every day the president is throwing a curveball. And what do I mean by that? Typically, a president might control a news cycle, maybe once a day. This president is controlling news cycles 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. And he's doing it from his armchair. He's just tweeting out wild thoughts. And in the process, with a wild thought, it's like a curveball. And then everybody else has to respond. But think about these curveballs he's been throwing out just in the last several days. Number one, refusing to accept that he lost an election. Nobody has ever done that I'm aware of. Number two, He's claiming that the election was fixed, it was rigged. Number three, he has brought almost 60, if not a little more than 60 petitions before various state and federal courts. These are curveballs, my friend. Presidents normally don't act like this. His refusal to accept the decision of the Electoral College. And then on January 5th, he's pressuring the Congress to override the Electoral College, threatening not to leave the White House on January 20th. And I tell you, there's a part of me that says, I hope he doesn't leave the White House. Because I want to see what the Marines are really made of. The few, the proud, and the brave. Because there's a reason why the Marines are in the White House. Their job is to walk the president out. They're not just there for ceremony. But if you have a president who decides he's not going to leave the White House, they are there to walk beside him nicely and say, Mr. President, it's time to go. It's time for the last ride in Marine One helicopter. You've been president for 4 years. Now is your time to take that last walk down the gangplank, the walk to Marine One. Live long enough, and you and I will face the dreaded curveball. The curveball of health, the curveball of wealth, the curveball of love. Marcus, I look at you and think about your age at 16. I first started liking girls at 16. And there's a little girl in my neighborhood I like. And you may have heard me preach about walking 2.5 miles from the Michigan Theater with her, starting at midnight to get to Glendale Street in my neighborhood. But I had a curveball with her. I really liked her. But we had porch love. My dad, because you remember Pam, Sister Pam from Glendale. And I really liked Pam. But we had a porch love because her mother and father wouldn't let me get beyond the porch. And Pam, at some point when I'm sitting out there in the warm months, I think we only dated in the warm months, but Pam would ask me very nicely, would you like a chicken sandwich or a turkey sandwich? And she introduced me to chicken and turkey on white bread with mayonnaise. And she put salt and pepper on it. And to this day, every time I eat a turkey or a chicken sandwich with salt and pepper on it, I think about porch love and how we couldn't get past the porch. And when I thought that her mother and her father were not looking, I would sneak a little kiss. But her mother and father were on me. They were on Pam, like white on rice. And because of that, porch love didn't get very far. I had my little infatuation, but the curveball was the mother and the father. And it's a funny thing, when I look back on it in retrospect, it's a funny thing, but it's a beautiful thing. And the real question is, how do you handle porch love? And where that's all you can do. And I look back on it, and frankly, Brother Marcus, I thank God for the porch love. I thank God that I never got beyond the porch. That's right. Because it kept both of us out of trouble. But life is full of curves. And the real question is, how will you respond to the curveballs of life? Will you respond like Mary and Joseph? Or will you cower in fear and helplessness? Will you respond with the courage, with the creativity of a Mary and a Joseph? Will you respond with the fearlessness of a Mary and Joseph to walk 429 miles? That's a long way. Think about how long. And the first real challenge of that 429 miles is walking through a desert. And it's a desert like you have never. It's a real desert. It's a harsh desert. It's not like the desert in Arizona. No. This is a desert of sand. And you can't see from the left or the right without seeing sand. Or will you respond with a sense of fear? Every morning when I face the dawning of a new day, I look forward to the challenges, I look forward to the opportunities, but most of all, I look forward to the surprises. I do not know what this day will bring, But with the help of God, I know it'll be a good day. Now, I know somebody in Detroit is listening to this may say, but Reverend, there's snow on the ground. How can you say it's a good day? Reverend, it's below zero right now. How can you in good conscience say it's going to be a good day? But I tell you something, I'm alive. And because I'm alive, I know it's going to be a good day. My encouragement to you this day is to remember Mary, remember Joseph, remember the baby Jesus on the run from Herod, going from town to town in Egypt, crossing the Nile River back and forth, and then going down the Nile. Think about them holding on in faith that God would see them through. And like Mary and Joseph, my encouragement to you is to keep on pushing. My encouragement to you today is keep on pushing. Keep on holding on. Keep on moving forward. You may not know where you're going. You may not see where you're going. You may not have ever heard of where you're going. But like Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus, keep on moving. And everywhere you go, you have a baby who will touch the ground and water will flow. Everywhere you go, you have a baby who is somehow making it real. Everywhere you go, you have people who are opening up their arms and their hearts because this baby Jesus is on the way. And I tell you, my friends, all I try to do every day is I just try to keep on moving. Every day of life, I try to keep on pushing. Every day of life, I look for hope. Every day of life, I look for energy. Every day of life, I look for the curveball. I say, throw me a curveball that I can't hit. Throw me a slider pitch I can't hit. Throw me a slow pitch ball and see if I can't hit it. And every now and then, just do me a favor and throw a fastball down the plate. It doesn't really matter what you were throwing at me because I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to keep swinging. I'm going to keep looking at that ball. I'm going to keep thinking about that ball. I'm going to keep measuring that ball. I'm going to keep spacing and timing that ball. Because when the ball gets in front of the plate, I'm going to swing that bat. And when I swing that bat, I'm going to make contact. And if I make contact, I'm going to run around the bases. And so, my friends, that's the hope that I give you this day, particularly the young people, the young parents of the world who are trying to figure out, how do I teach my child in distance learning? How do I keep my relationship together with a husband or wife? How do I keep my relationship together with an ex-wife, ex-husband? But I tell you, you keep pushing. You keep holding on. You keep looking to the sky to see the blessing that God has for you. What you will see is that God will bless you more abundantly, more fully than anything you can imagine. My friends, I thank you so much for watching this service today, and I invite you, those without a church home, I invite you to think about joining this church. I invite you. You need a church home. 65% of America doesn't want a church home. But 70+% of America believes that Jesus is the Son of God. Maybe you're in that group where you're spiritual but not religious. We're not going to live through a pandemic forever. But I want you to know, when the pandemic is over, I want you to think about joining this church. Why? Because the church is relevant. Why? Because the church is a church built on love. Think about it right now. And I want you to make a decision right at your breakfast room table. Maybe you're rolling over in the bed. I want you to make a decision right now and say to yourself, Lord, when this pandemic is over, I'm going to come back to church. And I'm going to give my life to you in a way that I've never felt comfortable doing before. I'm going to put you first. I'm going to try to follow your principles. And I'm going to love my neighbor easily as I love myself. I want you to think about giving your Just have faith and receive it. God knows that you need the bar and the shield. Can you sing it? And hold and sing it. There's a blessing in this house. And it's waiting for you. There's a blessing. What do I mean by that? There's money waiting for you. There's better health waiting for you right now. Just have faith to receive it. God knows that you need it. Just have faith. Just have faith to receive it. God knows. God knows that you need it. There's a blessing in this. There's a blessing in this house. It's waiting for you. It's waiting for you. I like this next verse. There's healing in this house, and it's waiting for you. I'm praying for Patrice Baker. Praying for James Brown. In this house. Cherry Conway. It's waiting for Dr. Amber Ray Ice. I'm praying for Harry Todd Sagan. Praying for Marcus Holloway. In this house. You know who you are. It's waiting for you. Just hold on in faith, and the healing of God will come down into your life. Just have faith. Yes. Praying for Laverne Johnson Young. For the healing in her foot. There's a blessing in this house. I like this next verse. Because what it talks about is there's love in this house. And it's waiting for you. Watch this. Go with me. There's love in this house. And it's waiting for you. You know I love you. I'm just totally titillated and thrilled when I hear it. There's love. It's what makes the world go. Yes. Just have faith. God knows. God knows. There's a blessing in this house. I invite you now to bow your heads in a word of prayer. O Lord our God, how excellent is thy name. Before the mountains were brought forth, wherever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. For 1,000 years in thy sight, it's like yesterday.